Thanks so much for tuning in to this year's first episode of The Cold Front. I'm Sabrina Bates.
And I'm Joie Bettenhausen.
So we just like to introduce ourselves. You probably haven't seen us much yet. This is our first show of The Cold Front, like we said. I'm the weather director of VUTV this year.
And I'm the assistant weather director.
Yeah, so we have a lot of responsibilities here, and one of them is the cold front. And part of the cold front is explaining to you guys about what's going on with the weather either right now or just explaining how it all develops and what happens.
Exactly. So like usually on a weather update and things like that, we can't really explain the meteorological concepts that go along with the weather, but this is our chance to really take what we learned in the classroom here at VU and really explain that to you guys in a different way.
Yeah, and the cold front started back in 2011, right around the same time that VUTV began.
Exactly.
So this is our 7th season, and we've really evolved since then.
Yes, we have. I remember just going back on YouTube a few days ago with you and just looking at the different graphics and seeing how now we're in HD and things like that, and everything just looks so much better, even the different scene changes and things like that, and also with content. So we've really evolved, and I'm really proud of where we've gone.
Yeah, definitely. And since we are new, like we said, we might as well introduce ourselves a little bit about what we do on campus here besides VUTV.
Exactly.
So if you want to go ahead first and explain what you do.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm obviously a senior meteorology major. I'm also part of sorority Chi Omega, so I do a lot of things with that outside. Also a part of the 2 meteorology clubs on campus, AMS and VUSIT. And, you know, I just like to go to football games, go to basketball games, and since it's my last year, try and do everything.
Yeah, you're also like an intramural football, right?
Yes, so I play intramural flag football. That's going on right now. It's my favorite sport, right next to basketball, and you know, I look forward to the games. It's like my little stress relief. Some people like to run. I like to play football.
That's great. You mentioned AMS and VUSIT.
Yes.
I'm also part of that too. They're meteorology orgs.
Yeah.
They're part of our department, and AMS is very business oriented.
Exactly.
Helps us get ready for the real world.
Exactly.
VUSIT's more about that whole storm chasing aspect and going out actually in the field and observing what's going to happen.
Right, and you were on e-board last year for VUSIT. Do you want to explain a little bit what you did?
Yeah. So it was great working with the rest of the e-board. We had code reds and code yellows. Code yellows, we would describe the weather of what's going on right now. And then the next day we would have our code red, which we would go out and actually observe that weather. Storm chase, you'd call it.
Exactly.
But we don't really like to use storm chase because it's kind of a dangerous term.
More of like a field study.
A field study.
We're really out there just to learn about the atmosphere and take what we learn in the classroom and put it into play.
Definitely, definitely. And along with being secretary, we also have our Christmas banquet.
And that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, around the Christmas time we bring the entire department together. The professors are there, the freshmen through the seniors. It's really a great experience.
Yeah, so we definitely are pretty busy, but we love VUTV. I know I've been a part of it since freshman year, and you've been a part of it since
sophomore year.
So yeah, it's like home to us.
Yeah, it's definitely like home, and we're glad you guys are here to join with us to talk about the weather and get to know us a little bit more.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go to a quick break real quick, and when we get back, we're going to be talking about tropical cyclones, starting with Hurricane Maria.
Plus the science behind both Hurricane Irma and Harvey. I remember hearing about these storms when they were making landfall on news and social media, and it was a pretty dramatic sight to see. The images that came out of the hardest hit areas were awful and very devastating to viewers at home, including myself, many of which are still without electricity and clean water 2 to 3 weeks later now as we speak. One of the hardest to be hit by Irma was the Caribbean island of San Juan, where the island dealt with Category 5 strength winds. Now Sabrina, for the viewers at home, what exactly is a Cat 5?
Yeah, Joy, you mentioned that Hurricane Maria was a Category 5 hurricane. A lot of these past ones have been these strong strengths, and these Category 5s are part of the Saffir-Simpson scale. That's what we call it here as meteorologists. So we're going to take a look here at a Category 1 hurricane. The winds are just a little bit stronger than what you would see as a tornado, but these winds are consistent. A tornado just quickly moves through the area. These wind speeds are consistent over many hours. That's why we have this damage. But for Category 1, we just have minimal damage. You see just a few of these trees are getting a little bit of that damage. Maybe some shingles are torn off of your house. Once we upgrade to a Category 2 hurricane, we have a little bit more damage. The wind speeds are around 100 miles per hour. So again, we're increasing those wind speeds as we go up higher on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Again, these trees are getting a little bit of damage, and the waves are going to be getting a little bit higher as well. We're going to upgrade to a Category 3 hurricane. Once we reach to Category 3, that's where we see the major hurricanes. We're also getting some devastating damage along with this as well. The wind speeds are between 111 and 125 miles per hour. As you can see here, the winds are just blowing these trees as they're almost bending over and also almost snapping. Now, a lot of these houses also are receiving a lot of damage. A lot of times the roofs will be thrown off of the houses as well. Now, as we upgrade to a Category 4 hurricane, the wind speeds are 130 to 156 miles per hour. This is where we start to see that catastrophic damage. A lot of these trees are almost blown out of the ground, and the house is almost destroyed too. And we see these ocean waters are starting to come up onto the land. Now, Category 5 hurricanes, this is the strongest hurricane category that we do have. The house is completely blown off of the land, indicating that most of the houses are going to see major damage from winds and also from the heavy amounts of flooding as well. And these trees are mostly out of the ground, and the wind speeds are over 157 miles per hour. Now, Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Irma, all these storms that we've seen within the past few weeks have been these Category 5 hurricanes, and that's why most of those coastal cities have seen so much damage along with this as well. A lot of the towns have been destroyed where a lot of people can't even live in them quite yet. Now, besides just those winds, we also have the storm surge that's also going to pose a lot of damage as well to these communities. So we have our normal sea level that's right here. That's where your ocean is going to be. But then your ocean surge is going to rise a little bit more. And the storm surge all has to do with the direction of the wind. So you're going to, if you have a hurricane, you have that rotation, you have that circular rotation. And now your upper right quadrant is where you're going to get those strongest wind speeds, but your storm surge could happen in any location. So with Hurricane Irma, we had it come up the Florida coastline there, and right onto the back end of that was where we got some of those winds as we were near Naples, and then also Miami got some winds too because we had that onshore flow as it started to push the water up onto the coastline. So we're going to take a look here at the storm surge. So as I said, the normal sea level right here, as we increase, we could get flood waters up to 12 feet of that storm surge. And that storm surge is definitely devastating to a lot of the communities right along the coast. They have their homes up elevated on the water, but when you get that storm surge of 12 feet, then it definitely makes it pretty difficult to survive that while you're living in those places. That's why we tell a lot of these people that they need to evacuate their homes. It's not a safe place when you have those strong winds, the miles per hour that are up to over 150 miles per hour.
Exactly.
That's very strong winds. And then also you get that storm surge too. It's definitely very dangerous to stay there at that time.
No, it definitely is. And what's sad for the people of Puerto Rico, it's like they don't live in the United States where they can just get on a bus or get on a vehicle or on a plane easily and fly to a different state. They're in their own separate island that is quite a distance away from the mainland of the United States. And, because of that, some, they're still without power. Many, I know I read this story and this was very, very sad, but some actually died because they lost power and life support couldn't keep going. And so I know they dealt with a lot of damage and things like that, and it's just really sad to see.
It definitely is. I know over almost 97% of that entire island was completely without power and was
Exactly.
destroyed. And it's so hard, like you said, for them to leave the island. I know I heard on a news source that in order for a family to leave the island, it's going to cost upwards of almost like $10,000. And
Exactly.
most people don't have that money, so it's going to be difficult to evacuate. And a lot of people just decide, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to try to ride this out, which unfortunately doesn't usually work.
Right, and we saw that happen also with Harvey and Irma. Many, wanted to just stay home, but even for those from Puerto Rico, a lot of people don't have family in the United States where they'd be like, okay, well, if they can just fly me out or I can stay there. It's also like, okay, I can evacuate, I can fly out, but then where to?
Right.
And that's the question that most people don't think of. And it's sometimes I have to sit back and think about because that's not something we deal with here.
Right. It's very humbling to try to
It is.
think about what those people actually had to deal with.
It is.
And I know a lot of people here, even on Valpo's campus, they have family that are in Puerto Rico right now.
Right.
And they were trying to get a hold of them this past week. And a lot of people just heard from them yesterday or the day before.
Which is definitely good to hear. And I know a lot of places in and around Chicago and here, I know we're sending possibly a group to those who've been affected by Hurricane Harvey, but I remember seeing on the news last night a lot of people in Chicago are trying to get together to pack water. I know there were skids of cases of water and food. And I know a lot of people are trying to like drive that out, but then it's so hard. It's because you have to load that on a ship or a plane to get that there.
Right.
And sometimes it's difficult to even get in because the area is so damaged.
Oh, right, exactly. And I know there's even a drive here on campus, I believe, that's going on too, where each of the different colleges, they have to collect different
Yes,
items.
yeah, I saw that.
There's like deodorant, different just little toiletries for people to kind of
Exactly.
use, because most likely they don't have any of that right now.
Exactly. And I know when it first started, the path went through the Lesser Antilles Islands, and now I know we don't think of that. We heard of Puerto Rico, but islands like St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Dominica, like all of those places were just as equally affected as Puerto Rico, which is really sad.
Exactly, because we've only heard of Puerto Rico.
Exactly.
Now, the Hurricane Maria did make direct landfall in Puerto Rico, which I feel like is probably why we also heard
Exactly.
more about it, whereas a lot of people don't think of those little islands like you said, but people do know of Barbados.
Right.
So, yeah, people know about those locations, but Puerto Rico was directly hit, and luckily Hurricane Maria did just go right on the northern edge of the Dominican Republic.
Exactly.
So they weren't affected by that, luckily.
But I know probably the storm surge was just as equally bad.
Right, exactly.
Now, thankfully, the future of Maria, it's not going to hit any more land. It's going to ride the coast towards North Carolina and Virginia, but then will veer off to the east. So thankfully, you know, it's on its way out, and hopefully no more devastation for future islands, states, things like that.
Hopefully not, because like you said, it's starting to move a little bit off the coast for right now.
Exactly.
Because I know that they were having some storm surge and stronger winds on Cape Hatteras, which is right along the North Carolina coastline there. So although that hurricane is probably a few hundred miles off to the east of North Carolina, they're still being affected by it.
Of course, waves and storm surge, you know, you can't go out to the coast and things like that, but thankfully nothing like what Puerto Rico saw.
No, exactly. And a lot of people don't think about the whole thing that even though that hurricane isn't directly making landfall and directly impacting you, you're still going to be affected by it. There's still that storm surge, so you're going to get flooding. And you could still see a few gusts, maybe up to 30, 40, 50 miles per hour. It's still definitely possible. But like we said, the next few days, we're going to be seeing Hurricane Maria drift offward into the Atlantic, definitely start moving to the east. And by this weekend, it's not going to be impacting any of us.
Thankfully.
So it's very good that we're not going to be seeing any more hurricanes for right now.
Exactly. Hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go to another commercial break, but we will be delving into the details of science behind hurricanes when we come back.
And later we talk about the societal impacts of these devastating tropical cyclones.
See you soon.
Thanks so much for sticking with us. Now we're going to delve into how and why these tropical cyclones form.
Now, what are some ingredients to make those tropical cyclones form?
One of the main things is going to be those warm surface temperatures that you see right along the equator. Now, most of the tropical cyclones or hurricanes that we start to see for over here in the United States form off the western coast of Africa. Now, those are going to start spinning up a little bit once we get all of that warm air and all of that moisture up into that cyclone. Eventually, it's going to start to form into a storm, and then it's going to keep spinning and spinning and spinning. Eventually, we're going to get that eye wall.
Exactly, and with that eye wall, we have warm air that rises through the center, and through that we have divergence aloft, meaning that air spreads out. So air will converge near the water surface and then rise up, but then also because of the eye wall, it allows the air to sink, making it clear in the center.
Right, exactly. And right along that center there is where, like you said, it's very clear and very cool. We call that the eye of the hurricane. Now, the strongest winds are right in that outer band of it right there, because that's where it's going to be spinning around the very strongest. Now, there's also the outer bands, too, where if you look at maybe like a satellite imagery of a hurricane, you'll see just some clouds that are kind of like thin little like circular bands around that hurricane. Now, those also are producing strong winds, but like we said, the strongest winds are in the very center of that hurricane. And we have that low pressure that's right at the surface, and that is what's also causing that eye center to stay very clear and cool as well. Now, that warm air, like you said, it's going to rise, and we have that spinning rotation around. That's what keeps that eye center very clear.
Right, and now a lot of people think, okay, now where is the most dangerous of the storm? And like you said, that is in the eye wall, but those bands that also form alongside of it are also very dangerous too. Those can cause heavy rains, damaging winds, and such. And like once you think the eye wall passes you and it's very clear because you know you'll be in the eye, but then you have that second round of that eye wall, and that's true. Like a lot of things can be even more damaging than the first passage of the eye wall.
Right, exactly. The winds are definitely the biggest part of this hurricane. So as it starts to develop even more, those winds are just going to keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger, intensifying that hurricane, which is going to also increase the moisture and also going to make it much more devastating for when it does make landfall.
Right. And now I know a lot of people wonder, like, why do hurricanes have names? And so we're looking on the National Hurricane Center, and each year they come up with a list of names, A through, I think, W. And so they go through each list. Anytime there's a tropical cyclone, they'll assign it to a name if it becomes major, and they just keep going through the list.
Yeah, and the National Hurricane Center uses these names to name all these tropical cyclones because it just makes an easier form of communication. We have tropical cyclones that eventually will turn into hurricanes, then tropical depressions. So there's just so many different various levels for these tropical cyclones, and just naming them makes it a lot easier to understand. All right, so we have Hurricane Maria now with a tropical depression, but we still call it Maria. And even though we have these typhoons and also
Different cyclones and things like that.
Yeah, all those are named, so just everyone around the world can understand, all right, this is exactly what we are talking about right now. Definitely better forms of communication for the public and also for meteorologists.
Right, and what's interesting, and I didn't know this till about a few days ago, is that the Atlantic storms have different set of names, and same with the Pacific storms and things like that. And so you might think like, okay, do they recycle the names, or do they just get rid of that list and think of a new list? Well, actually, I think it's every 4 to 5 years they recycle those names. Now, some of those names might not be on there because they'll be retired, such as Hurricane Joaquin and obviously Hurricane Katrina. And the reason they retire these names is because they don't want to discredit those hurricanes or do a disservice or make it insensitive if another storm was equal intensity or vice versa. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Right, it definitely is very interesting. We can take a look at some of these Atlantic names right now. We've already gotten through, our last hurricane was Maria, so we're already halfway through that list for Atlantic hurricanes, and we're only in that very peak of the hurricane season right now.
I think we're about halfway, so if there was another system to develop, it would be Nate, then Ophelia, then Felipe. So hopefully we don't get through the list.
Hopefully not. Hopefully if we do start to make our way through the list, they're only tropical cyclones or tropical storms. They're not going to form into major hurricanes like we have seen so far these past few years. And actually the National Hurricane Center has the list of names up through 2022 already. So they've been working with the World Meteorological Organization, who's been putting these names together, and then the National Hurricane Center assigns each of these storms once they start to become a little bit more dangerous, once they become that disturbance in the Atlantic Ocean or even the Pacific Ocean, depends which ocean it's going to be in.
Right, so if viewers at home, if you wanted to check out a list of these names, you can go right on to the National Hurricane Center or type in Google National Hurricane Center Atlantic names and maybe see a few that you might like.
Yes, and we have one last break, but when we come back, we'll be talking about the societal impacts about all of these tropical cyclones.
More to come on that.
Welcome back to the Cold Front. We hope you enjoyed the scientific explanation about how these tropical cyclones form.
Now let's shift gears and discuss some of the societal impacts that these places have experienced.
Yeah, like we discussed before, Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Harvey have left dramatic circumstances for most of the hardest hit areas.
NASA has released the WorldView imagery that will truly make your spine tingle. Let's all take a look.
All right, so we're going to take a look at the two images here. We have the image at the top that was before Hurricane Irma hit. Now you can see that on the islands of St. John, St. Thomas, and all the other islands around it, they have the green foliage that's still on the island.
Right, and if you look at the second image, it's completely different. It looks brown. You can't tell of really any foliage there left.
Yeah, that hurricane with all those strong winds definitely stripped that island of all of those trees, and that's been a natural part of the island, so now it's just very different right now.
And if you think about like how would you go about fixing that, maybe planting new trees and stuff, like I don't know if you could ever make it back to how it originally was, and probably maybe take like 5 to 10 years, if not more.
Right, exactly, because not only are all these trees gone, all those trees are all over the place on the island right now, and you have to also account for all the homes that have been destroyed, and all of the buildings, everything is all over the place, so they have to clear all of that out of the way first before they can start rebuilding these trees and make this environment back to how it used to be.
And I know it's going to take quite a bit of time dealing with all of that, and just I know with Hurricane Harvey and things like that, a lot of, you think about Katrina and many people were displaced, and sure, the numbers with Katrina were a lot more than with Harvey, but it's like, okay, now these homes are all destroyed, like where do these people go? And because of Hurricane Katrina, a lot of the population hasn't replenished itself, it's still a lot less, so it's kind of interesting to think, like, how will the people of Texas, will those areas be replenished with the population, or will it stay decreased?
Right, because like you mentioned, Hurricane Katrina, it's been 12 years since that last occurred, and Louisiana they have government support. They have people who are able and resources too to help fix this part of the country, and it's still, like you said, very devastated still. There's still parts that still need to be fixed, and so considering if you go down to Puerto Rico, it's going to take a while for them, but luckily for us, I don't know if you would say really luckily, but there is still some government aid that we could use for over in Texas with Hurricane Harvey, because they had a lot of flooding.
Exactly, and like we mentioned before, it's easier to get a semi-trailer or to take a van or a vehicle or even a plane to be able to fly in those resources. So definitely two different scenarios, and we hope that nonprofit organizations and governments and things like that can really step in and really help these people out, because they do really need our help. Right.
One of the biggest things with Hurricane Harvey, like we said, was the flooding with it. It was definitely not as expected to have that much flooding, but actually Hurricane Harvey caused about $150 billion to $180 billion worth of damage, which was actually more costly than Hurricane Katrina and also Hurricane Sandy. So it was very, very devastating to that area. So it's going to cost a lot to fix this as well, even though they might have the resources to replenish the area. And then if you think about all of the water, I know I read up that usually around 49 to 50 inches of rainfall falls within Texas over the year, but they receive 48 inches alone just with Harvey. So it's like, okay, maybe the water has subsided, but what do you do when places are eroded because of the water? Like, that's going to have to be rebuilt. Right. Definitely a big part of it is going to be rebuilding all of that. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of volunteers that are going to be going down there. I'm sure the Red Cross are sending people and other organizations to help it, because definitely the people down there are going to have a little bit of trouble fixing all that themselves. Exactly. No, it's true. All right, well, that just about does it for this episode of The Cold Front. Follow us on VUTV Weather on Facebook for your latest weather updates. And stay up to date by following us around the campus and the community. All right, I'm Sabrina. And I'm Joy. Have a great end of your week, Valpo.